Well, when people meet me, they don't know that I didn't originally cut my teeth on LGBT rights and equality and justice. I cut my teeth on environmental degradation in the state of West Virginia, the practice of mountaintop removal. I went as a college student to protest at the state capitol in Charleston, and on that same day, the Methodist Federation for Social Action Board was meeting in Charleston, West Virginia, and so the board marched over from the church where they were meeting, and the MC announced, "The Methodists are here." And I thought, "Yeah, I'm here. But the Methodist Federation for Social Action showed up, and for anyone who's engaged in any kind of ministry, showing up is about 90% of ministry. And so the work of MFSA is to continue to show up. And that might mean showing up on the state house steps, it might mean showing up on a courthouse step, or a schoolhouse step, or it might mean showing up on the church house step. So today's plenary session is about the intersections. We've heard a lot about intersectionality so far, and we want to just kind of drive that home, that concept of intersectionality. And so we have a panel of real live United Methodists who are doing work that engages the intersections of justice in very unique and interesting ways. At MFSA, we are working with an organizing principle that reminds us that all experiences of marginalization and injustice are interconnected, because the struggle for justice is tied to concepts of power and privilege. Intersectional organizing recognizes that injustice works on multiple and simultaneous levels. So what does it mean to be a trans person of color? What does it mean to be a gay or lesbian person who is differently able? What does it mean to be an immigrant who also faces issues of economic injustice? Because injustice doesn't happen in a vacuum, it's imperative to organize in that intersectional framework and to create bold spaces for understanding privilege, taking action, and building effective systems of resistance and cooperation. Our four panelists do that work in their daily lives and sometimes their nightly lives as well, because they work on multiple issues. I'm going to briefly introduce them. You can see their bios in a little bit, but from the beginning down here, we have Anne Craig. Everyone, Anne Craig is an amazing United Methodist. You may know her through numerous works that she's done with men and with women and global ministries. She's also an effective communicator, but Anne's biggest passion right now is working in Africa to bring the message that LGBTQ people are loved and beloved. Thank you, Anne. I had the pleasure of getting to the next panelist, Jenny Phillips, when I was on a trip to the Seattle area. Jenny's a graduate of Union Theological Seminary and has brought her work back to the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest, where she actually serves as the Minister for Environmental Stewardship for the Pacific Northwest Annual Conference. That's actually a job, so. But Jenny's real passion over the past year or so has been creating an organization called Fossil Free UNC. Fossil Free UNC. You can get these great little buttons here in the resource room. Jenny's work in a work of people in annual conferences. This year, we were able to get 11 annual conferences to pass resolutions about divestment from fossil fuels. So, thank you. Catherine Johnson should need an introduction in this space. Catherine Johnson is my predecessor. One of my predecessors was the Methodist Federation for Social Action as Executive Director. Today, Catherine serves as the Program Director for the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. And his last fellow on the end is Jason Reddick. I met Jason Reddick in jail. About a year ago, Jason and I had the opportunity to join with hundreds of others, literally over 100 other faith organizers, to stand and call for the Obama administration to put into deportation and family detention in immigrants. And so, Jason and I BBC Heat and the zip tie behind our backs. Jason does great organizing in the North Texas area around issues of immigration and anti-racism, but he's also a youth minister, so props to Jason for all that work he does, and engaging our youth in conversations and dialogue. So I wanted to give a little bit of an opportunity to each of the panelists to talk about where they see the justice work that they're doing individually and with others, intersecting with other topics of expressions of justice work. So let me get that. So start with whoever's ready to go.
Great. It's so good to see your faces out here, and just want to share that in the last 5 years, before the last general conference, I have been drawn in, and I would blame God for this, to work in a transcontinental intersectional way, working with the fellowship to form the fellowship global under the leadership of now Bishop Joseph Fulton and the directorship of Bishop Yvette Funder and myself, to challenge the stereotype that Africans and African Americans are monolithically against LGBT rights. So we are in the process of identifying progressive faith leaders on the ground in East and West Africa and introducing them to each other and introducing them to LGBT people who are willing to speak up and risk their lives to change their countries. I function in that context as a real bridge. I'm very clear that I bring my whiteness to this job. I bring my whole United Methodist connection, my connections with Gay Lesbian Alliance and Defamation when I was there, and I bring to the service of racial justice very directly. And understand that as I do that, I bring it to my own service. So I am, I think one of the things that we realize is that we embody these intersections. And when my brothers and sisters, people of color, are harmed, I believe and feel I am harmed. And it is the family of God that is harmed. I come from Midwestern roots. I moved to the East Coast. My family is interracial. We have experienced the prison industrial complex. We have experienced mental illness. So all of these intersections are personal to me. And I try to find ways to discuss them in ways that are professional and support in the P word today to make a difference in this world. Thank you.
As Chet shared, I coordinate Fossil-Free UMC, and we are urging the agencies and institutions of the United Methodist Church to stop investing in fossil fuels. Now, our pension fund alone holds $21 billion. That's a lot of money. And if money is power, we have a great opportunity to be a voice for great good in the world. Now, how we're using our voice now on climate when it comes to money and the pension fund is we currently have $700 million invested in the top 200 fossil fuel companies, and many, many more millions of dollars invested in infrastructure companies that support the industry. Now, the church already screens its investments for other industries that conflict with its values. We don't invest in alcohol or tobacco, adult entertainment, nuclear weapons, and some others. And we think that climate change is an important enough issue that we should stop investing in fossil fuels as well. Because we are a global church, and we have clergy and missionaries and lay people on the front lines of climate change around the world. Every ministry of the United Methodist Church will be touched by climate change, because every person on this earth will be touched by climate change. Indeed, we are already being touched by climate change. And it doesn't make sense to use our ministries and our souls and our spirits to mitigate and recover from the impacts of climate change, and then fund our retirements with money from the companies that are wreaking this havoc on our earth. And so when Chet asks about how this work intersects with other justice work, people on the margins are the first and hardest hit victims of climate change. When you remember Hurricane Katrina, who suffered first and most? Black people, poor people, disabled people. When you think about last week, there was a huge heat wave in Iran, 165 degrees. We didn't see a lot of stories about this, but my best guess is that some of the people who suffer were women who are required to be dressed from head to toe when they're out, the elderly, children, people who don't have the resources to be able to find cool places to be. Who is the most vulnerable when disaster strikes? The same people who are the most vulnerable in everyday life. And the same people who gain power by exploiting God's creation are the people who gain power by exploiting God's human creatures. And so the bottom line is, if we're going to survive the floods that are coming, we've all got to get on the ark together.
As Chet said, my current ministry is with the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. Many of you are familiar with RCRC, either as members or supporters over the years. The current mission of RCRC is to be the leading religious voice for reproductive rights, reproductive health, and reproductive justice. We work ecumenically in an interfaith manner. When the first question Chet had sent to us was about the context in which we worked, my first thought was the context of RCRC. My second thought was about the context in society right now, in which we're doing work for reproductive health, rights, and justice. And we are working at a time when the attack on women and their autonomy, their agency, their wisdom, all is under a vicious, vicious attack. So it's a very important time for those of us as people of faith to be speaking out with compassion and love and support for women and their agency and their ability and rights to make the right choices for themselves in their lives. Reproductive justice, the principles of reproductive justice are that people should have the right, women should have the right to have children when they choose to do so. They should have the right not to have children when that is their choice. And they should have the right to raise the children that they have in a healthy and safe environment. The RCRC and the work for choice has moved in this direction of reproductive justice, which is a movement that was begun in the early 1990s, led by women of color, vulnerable women who were reacting to the choice movement in saying that for many of us, choice is not an option. For those that are poor, for those that don't have access to health care, for those that live in situations where we are victims of violence, it's not a matter of choice. And in this sense, the work of RCRC and the reproductive justice movement is entirely intersectional. It is focused on the point that in order for women to make these very sacred decisions about when, if, and how they'll have a family and how to keep that family safe, that we need to address these issues of racism, access to health care, economic justice, so that those decisions can be made. RCRC also serves as a bridge. I heard Anne talk about being a bridge. between religious communities and secular reproductive justice organizations. Reproductive justice organizations are saying we need that faith voice because there could be nothing more sacred than making these decisions. And there could be nothing more Christian or for other faiths, an expression of their faith, than to reach out to those who are in situations of poverty, need, and oppression. So the movement is entirely an intersectional movement. I think I'll stop there for now.
My context is here in Texas. I work on issues of immigration. This last legislative session, we had a number of bills that I would go down to Austin and try to lobby against. I'm also a big abolitionist against the death penalty. So again, in Texas, we've already executed 9 people. We've got 2 next week back to back, the 12th and the 13th. So that's unfortunately a very active portion of my activism. And then here recently, really since tomorrow is the anniversary of Michael Brown, I've involved myself with the Black Lives Matter and anti-police brutality movement in Dallas. And so we're talking about intersections. All of these issues have intersections. So this last year, Texas executed a gentleman, I forgot his name, but he killed a police officer. And come to find out, the police officer that he killed had 50 accusations of police brutality lodged against him. And so obviously, in Texas, when you kill a police officer, we take that, the people here take that very seriously. And this gentleman was sentenced to die. And there's questions that remain over was he a victim of police brutality and fighting for his life. Again, with the police brutality and immigration, Ruben Garcia, who was killed in Grapevine, we saw that some of you may have seen the video. He was, hands up and was shot there, and nothing has been done. And then when we look at even immigration and the death penalty, you have another instance of a police officer that was killed. There was also a migrant immigrant who was killed at the same time, and there were no charges brought against the person who killed the immigrant. And yet there was the murder charges against the police officer. And so we see these issues consistently moving about. Another one, certainly in a space like this, that is probably interesting is the immigration movement with LGBTQ rights. And so we're seeing the immigrant activists for a long time were not very sensitive to LGBTQ rights. And now all of a sudden, as we unfortunately see more and more of these folks go back to their home countries and get killed, now the movements have started to join forces. And so it's interesting, even in Austin, there's a deportation case where a lot of the LGBTQ from the churches and activists got around because it was a LGBTQ activist from Central America. So to me, I consistently see all these intersections. And for me, the intersections all point towards Jesus. Because we hear Roman soldiers and flogging, we don't think of police brutality. We think of the cross, and we don't think of that as being there in our chain. We think of, we don't know Jesus' personal life, but personally I believe Jesus was queer, black, and poor. And all of those come together for me. And how can I not involve myself in these various movements?
So one of the things is that intersectional work is actually more difficult than just going out and doing justice work because it's about the work of collaboration. And these 4 folks up here only represent a small portion of the work that NMSA collaborates on. Issues about peace and justice in Palestine, we work with United Methodist Cairo's response. Numerous other issues that we could do that work around up here. But so that leads to the question of how has intersectional justice seeking, how has that made you work better, or how has it made you work more difficult?
it makes the work possible. And I want to share a couple stories, one story on reflection. And the story is a United Methodist leader in Africa right now who stood up and created a workshop for clergy, the United Methodist clergy there, and the issues that they wanted to talk about, because they're going to go into general conference, are poverty, healthcare around Ebola in particular, women's dignity, women's bodies, LGBTI rights and intersex is LGBTI is the popular usage in Africa, and exploitation of resources. These are the issues that are coming in from Africa to general conference. These are our issues too. So we have that intersection. That intersection is making the work possible. So people are saying we need that change, and I want to just have a slight reflection. And then is the Syrophoenician woman, and we've got no more crumbs, but it was the crumbs that changed Jesus' mind. When that woman stood up to him, when he made a racial slur, and she said, yeah, but even the dogs have the crumbs under the table, and Jesus changed his mind. So I think the scripture gives us hope. I think Jesus himself gives us hope that change is possible. All of these issues are our issues. We are at the intersection of issues in our bodies and our souls.
It is hard work to stand up and name it when something is wrong. People don't want to hear it. And it's hard work to stand up and name what's wrong with the system when it's a system that we've all been complicit with and that we perceive we're benefiting from. It's hard work. And I think on the issue of climate, intersectionality is key not only because of the impacts of climate change, but because of the justice work that has come before. I'm grateful to be able to go before groups of people and tell them, you don't have to be a scientist to stand up and talk about climate change. Any more than you have to be an LGBTQ person to be an ally to LGBTQ people. Any more than you have to be an economist to talk about poverty or a nutritionist to talk about hunger. As people of faith, we express our values by the way we live in the world, and that is the ground on which we stand, and that is the ground on which all of our justice advocacy work rests.
And I'd say that working intersectionally, at least for me, has tapped into my passion. When we gather in a room like this, there are people that are passionate about justice for LGBTQ people. There are people that are passionate about economic justice, passionate about immigration because of those things that have touched our lives. And so when we're working together for justice and understanding the ways in which those things are related, it releases our passion. It also, I think, releases or taps into our faith. When we understand the ways in which these things are related, it taps into those places where when we seek to follow Jesus, we understand the ways in which these things are related, and we can live out our faith and we can live out our passion. When we separate these and become focused on just one, I believe we cut off pieces of who we are as people of faith. We cut off passion that exists within our lives. So work for justice intersectionally is hard. It's hard because we have to listen to people that have different experiences and understand issues that may not be our own. But it is easy in the sense that it releases our passion and our faith.
So to me, one of the harder things is occasionally my senior pastor will call me into our office and mention another email or phone call from the bishop's office about the work that I'm doing. And so consistently being able to point to the social principles and point to Western theology as motivation for what I do and why I do it. is a piece to me, but also serving kind of a suburban, white, progressive church. So these issues around race and police brutality, these issues around the death penalty. Unfortunately, we're running into some folks in our church that do live single-issue lives. And so trying to open up their eyes that there are more issues at hand has been difficult conversations. In fact, some I would say more difficult than even folks who recognize the issue but just don't believe in it. So that part's been difficult to broaden folks' perspectives.
So in the interest of time and knowing that we want to hear more great Bible study from Grace and Matthew, we're going to kind of be wrapping this part up, but I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to meet and greet with these folks and to ask them what resources are available that you can take and read and share, because I think resources are so important in the work of justice. We have to learn, we have to act, we have to reflect. And those are our three parts of faithful intersectional organizing. And I think the last question I'm going to ask, and it will lead us into our afternoon very well. How do you see your work impacting General Conference next year?
Great. As I just said, there are possibilities. This is not a monolithic reality. Change is happening today. And I just wanted to share with you that Reconciling Ministries Network is partnering with Fellowship Global. You may not all know that, to work in Côte d'Ivoire, which is the West Africa, French-speaking. And so we are collaborating with Reconciling Ministries Network and with affirmation. For all of you who have your roots in affirmation, which means everybody in the room, because Reconciling Ministries Network emerged out of affirmation. Affirmation has decided in the last month to fund 2 economic development projects for LGBTI people in Uganda. So you are already in the work, and it is already face-to-face with United Methodists in Africa to build community, to hear the issues, to work at the intersections. So you and I and everybody here is already doing it, already having an impact on General Conference.
The United Methodist Church and its boards and agencies have been active on climate for years, and there's lots of work in social principles already on the environment and on climate. I think the thing that we're bringing to the table at General Conference is that we're forcing the people who manage money to take a position on climate. And we're asking everyone to really decide, is it right for the church to be profiting from fossil fuels? We're pushing them to make a moral decision. It's a hard decision, and we know it's a complicated decision. And yet the conversation that's happening between people who are deeply enmeshed with environmental stewardship and the people who are deeply enmeshed with financial stewardship is a crucial conversation that the church needs to be leading the world in, and that's what we're doing. I urge you to visit fossilfreeumc.org, to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter, and if you are an artist or activist who wants to get involved in this movement in General Conference, please find me and see me. Thank you.
The Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice will be under attack at General Conference. I think it will be one of the highest priorities of those on the right to speak out and try to get the Methodist Church to speak against RCRC. I hope they're not successful in doing that, but I want to say that's not the most important thing. The reconciling movement in MFSA, we know that we don't have to have approval from General Conference to do the work that we need to do. And the work that we need to do in affirming women and their right to have children, not to have children, and to raise their children in a healthy and safe environment is work that goes on every day in our local churches. So as I say, we will work hard at General Conference to make sure that all policies that are passed affirm and uphold these rights for women. But we will not be defeated, and we will not be stopped in our work if something passes that is not favorable to RCRC, our work will go on. And one of the most important pieces of that work currently is we are doing training, pastoral care training, workshops in churches across the country for reproductive decision-making and reproductive loss, talking with pastors about this essential pastoral care. I hope all of you will have these trainings in your church. I've put flyers up here on the stage. I hope you take them. I hope you contact us at RCRC. And let us work with you in your churches to do this pastoral care training, to begin these conversations that are so hard to have and that we aren't having. The silence in our churches today around reproductive justice issues is similar to the silence many years ago around LGBT issues in our church. We need to be having those conversations every day and build from the ground up, and what happens at General Conference happens at General Conference. But we know that we do the work every day of the year.
Since 1968, the United Methodist Church has promised to become and work to become more racially diverse, and yet the report just released 94% white. And so my hope is that we would continue that work, we would double down. And I think like a small anecdote of that is for anybody at General Conference, bishops, worship leaders, anybody else, to perhaps not say all lives matter, to say Black lives matter.
Because this is just a glimpse of what justice could look like. We speak our truths into being. And in the hopes of that, we take all of these intersections and the spokes of the wheel where they all intersect, and on the layers of those wheels where there's multiplicity in our lives, we bring our whole selves to this work. We work not only to change the church, institutional church, we work to change the church, the people in the church. And so it is in that transformation of both terms of the church that MFSA continues to do the work, that RMN continues to do the work, that all of these partner organizations that we work with in a multitude of ways continue to seek that kingdom of justice and equality and liberation. Thank you, friends.